Great. So we're recording now. Thank you so much and welcome, Alessandro. Um, for those of you watching who don't know Professor Alessandro, just like a short bio, he's a full professor at the University of Glasgow, where he's with both the School of Computing Science and the Institute of Neuroscience and Psychology. Professor Vinciarelli also sits on SubStrata's advisory board. So welcome and thank you so much for having another chat with me. This time I just wanted to explore a little bit about how and if technology can help us improve our nonverbal communication. You know, who is doing it well? How can technology analyze social signals to ultimately help us refine how we're perceived or to really understand how others communicate with us?
Well, yes, technology can help us to build what we call a feedback loop. What does it mean? The way we learn, and I put it into quotes because it's not really a formal learning, right? We learn how to use our own nonverbal communication essentially is through the interaction with others. We start by imitating, and really when we are a very small child, those of you who have familiarity with newborns, very quickly they learn how to display reactions that obtain a certain reactions. So machine can basically help us to do that once we are grown up, once we know how to do it in normal setting. They can help us to do it in specific setting, essentially through a feedback loop. They can, for example, let us know when we are talking too much, when we are talking too fast, when we are not smiling. So essentially what they can do, they can give us indications about the way we are displaying nonverbal communication, and so we can decide whether we keep doing that or we avoid doing that, depending on whether we consider that to be a particular mistake or not. So from this point of view, they can implement in a more explicit, in a more evident, maybe in a more formal way, that type of feedback loop we constantly have with the people we have around. So in general, when we interact with another person, we figure it out because we understand whether the people around us are giving a positive feedback or not. And with a machine, essentially, we can get that type of feedback in a more let's say, explicit and formal way, and we can adapt our behavior in the same way as we do when we see that the people around us react in a way that it is not what we expect, right? And so we really can use this very natural mechanism we have, which is imitation and adaptation to what we have around. And the machines can be very good at helping us to do that.
Great. I mean, there's also like different types of nonverbal communication, right? Because it can be visual, it can be based on sound, it can be based on so many things. And I think especially in a digital world, and I mean, I'm thinking more of a business environment, let's say, when most of the communications are via email, calls, video conference. And by the way, even in written communication, I was reading an article that described some of the subtext in those emails as the digital body language, whether it's the use of emojis, the use of caps, the jokes, the sarcasm, the irony. So it's not necessarily what's written, but what's between the line in those email communication. Can machines find out, how can machine help us decipher the meaning behind those pitches or negotiations via email?
Yeah. So first of all, it's very interesting to observe that, once email started to become one of the main ways of communication and later SMS, social media, etc. So very digital way of communicating, a way of communicating that is unprecedented in our history as a species. However, immediately we manifested the need to convey also this other subtext type of information, right? Emotion, etc. And it was introduced through emoticons, right? So immediately the diffusion, the popularity of emoticons tells how much we need to have that component going on, even when we move through communication channels that are not what we are using face-to-face interaction. And the reason is exactly that our entire brain, our cognition, our psychology are shaped after face-to-face interaction where this social, this nonverbal component is there. So what happens? One trick we use is the formal one, so introducing emoticons or introducing conventions. So we know that in typing, for example, using capital letters correspond to shout. So we have agreed at a certain point, more or less formally, that that's what it is about. But what is very interesting is that we manifest our inner state in this communication, even, for example, through the way we type. Faster, slower. And interestingly enough, this is not something that our counterpart can see often during this type of communication, right? So the tendency to use, however, certain characters rather than other, delete a lot, correct a lot, rather than going more for a conversation like, etc. And same thing in anything we use in a type of online communication. How much time we take when we respond to an email. For example, social verticality, right? We know that there are some people from a social point of view supposed or perceived to be above the others. Well, we are going to answer very quickly to those people because we feel an obligation. The vice versa, people can take a little bit more time. So we communicate also through that, for example, how much we consider the other person important, or at least how much we consider important the topic that is being discussed. So what is interesting is to see that non-verbal aspect, subtext, it's something so pervasive, so much, how can I say, wired in our cognition, in our psychology, that even when we move through communication channels that do not allow us to use non-verbal communication as we do in nature, in face-to-face with our body, still there is a component, and still we perceive that component in the sense that we receive an email and somewhat we can feel how it was written, right? Sometimes probably even in a way that goes beyond the intentions of the person that wrote it. So from this point of view, there is not so much we can do about. Our brain is wired to work in that way. When we get digital communication, it passes through our brains like it passes through a bottleneck, and it gets necessarily interpreted with that. And it is very interesting because we are really on the frontier here, in the sense that we do not know yet well how this works. There are initial studies on how we interpret and how we feel, how we sense this type of communication, but a lot is still to be understood. However, I mean, there is consensus that actually it happens even through digital interfaces, and it happens in the same way as it does in face-to-face interaction. It is a mechanism we cannot escape, right? Mm-hmm. Through digital interfaces, it is something that we are not very good capable at understanding yet, at dominating yet, and probably in the future we will have to develop a bit of literacy about, right? To understand that sometimes maybe we get misunderstood because some of the counterpart can get it. But it can also help us to do it in the right way, to be understood in the right way, to send the right message, to achieve our goals through communication and so on.
Happens in WhatsApp, I think, especially in written communication all the time, misunderstandings. No, I meant it as a joke. Yeah. I wasn't being serious, or, why are you getting offended? Or, it's really, really interesting. And I was also thinking about what you said before about, the speed at which we type and how many corrections we make, or how furiously or how hard we press on the keyboards. I mean, what if my computer was able to measure my state of mind or my emotion or my intention based on how fast I type? So, okay, maybe the recipient won't know that, but maybe my laptop might. So they might offer me a product or like a different type of notification if I was stressed or if I'm in a relaxed, happy mood. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, who can technology companies leverage our social signals to upsell us? And I know, we've spoken before about, even like Alexa or Siri. Do they know how we're feeling? Do they know if we're in the mood for shopping or in the mood to, to dim down the lights and listen to quiet music based on the speed of speech or our tone? Can they sense it, how we're feeling?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is absolutely something that can be exploited. It is something that can be used in order to improve products, in order to make products more aware of how we feel, and then see how to use that information to provide a better service, to be more effective, etc. Let's say there are two main types, right? One is this type of intelligent communication channels that can maybe get what you mentioned earlier through the way we type, the way we feel, and give us, for example, some advice on how to move, how to smooth, how to change our communication, etc. Another one is what you mentioned, Siri, Alexa, what do they do? The reason why they speak, the reason why they use this type of natural way of communicating is exactly that by disguising as humans, because that's what they do, right? They are a piece of technology, but they disguise as humans. They bring us to be more open and to probably to give more easily the type of information they expect us to give in the most natural way, right? So it is something that helps us to be more open. So there is something very interesting. For example, there are studies showing that people tend to disclose their feelings more openly in front of an artificial psychologist than how they will do in front of a real psychologist, in front of a person, right? Which is very interesting, because it shows that to a certain extent, our feelings, our unconscious feelings, make us feel like we are in front of a person, so make us ready. But rationally, we know that that is not of a person, so we feel less judged, we feel less involved, we feel that it is not a real person, so it's not a problem. And so we also lose some inhibition in telling maybe things about ourselves that we don't know, that we typically we will not want to share. So from this point of view, technologies like this, by disguising our humans, help us to deliver more information, and that can then be used according to different goals and purposes depending on the particular service.
Amazing. And I kind of like have like one last question, which is more related about like person-to-person communication. Can technology help us? Because one of the ways you explain it, like usually human-to-human communication is always like a dance and it's a constant feedback loop. So how can technology help us improve that feedback loop, whether it's, a negotiation or, two people on a dating site or, patient and doctor, whatever it might be, student and professor, like how can technology help us that communication?
Well, persuasion is an interesting phenomenon, right? On the one hand, it's based on our ability to provide good arguments for whatever type of point we are trying to make. On the other hand, you can prepare the conditions for our point to be persuasive. So very important point, for example, it is somewhat you have to look authoritative and trustworthy. And this part depends on what you say, on your actual competence, your actual being a trustworthy person, and so on. However, part is the way you present yourself. So, for example, you see today I'm wearing my jacket that makes me look automatically more serious and probably a little bit more weight. But there is, for example, a certain way of speaking that helps to look more competent. And interestingly enough, when it comes to competence, for example, there are in our brain pathways that immediately estimate, based on your behavior, whether you are a competent person or not. What does it mean, competent? Again, we have to go back to our evolutionary history. We are in the forest, we meet another individual. We quickly have to understand whether in a fight we can be we have a chance to survive, to win or not, right? So we have all these basic mechanisms that help to understand whether the person in front of us is someone we can trust, is someone that is competent enough to get over us in case there is a fight, and so on. So from that point of view, there are a number of ways of presenting yourself that somewhat help you to establish trust, to show that you are competent, that you know what you talk about. And so to a certain extent, there is a way to present yourself. There are forms of nonverbal communication that help others to understand that actually there is value in what you say, that you are a person that can be trusted, and so on. Once again, I will say, essentially is a matter of avoiding mistakes. So avoiding being a competent person, knowing how to say it, but you communicate it in such a way that people think, this person is not very smart, or even this person is not someone to trust, right? So essentially it's about making it clear through your nonverbal behavior that you know what you talk about and that you are a person that can be trusted. So for sure it can be done. Yeah.
Showcase confidence. Brilliant. Thank you so much for all these insights. And yeah, I just look forward to chatting more and discovering more. Always a pleasure, Alessandro. Thank you very much.
For me. Thank you very much.
Bye.